out old clothes.
Okay. We should have just made Dio busy. Yeah, what the heck?
He was busy doing dishes and laundry. Lights, please. Okay. Market equilibrium is efficient. It's the only place where you get the highest total surplus is at equilibrium. Anywhere away from market equilibrium, you are not achieving total surplus. This is an absolute. Think of it kind of like you do the PPC. Only on the PPC are you being totally efficient. Anywhere inside, you're wasting. So, in terms of achieving maximum total surplus, you want to be at equilibrium. Government can't just snap its fingers and change total surplus by reallocating resources. That doesn't do it. Okay? Government can't just do that. You may see a question that tries to trap you into thinking that government can affect that. Guy by the name of Adam Smith. Book gives you a little bit of reading about him. Wrote The Wealth of Nations. He gives us the concept laissez-faire, often described as being hands-off. Just let it happen, let it be. Laissez-faire is a school of thinking in economics that says there should be no government intervention. The market should just be a completely free market. Oh, this one? Allow them to do. I want you to picture a bad mime. Okay. Although laissez-faire would be ideal, there is no economy in the world where laissez-faire exists. Once government exists, government takes a role, and we fail to achieve total laissez-faire situations. There is no totally free market economy around. What you looking for, Sherm?
I'm looking for someone's plan to put under this stupid desk.
Okay, thanks. All right. So let's say, perfect world here, resources are allocated not by the market, but by a central planner. Let's go Soviet Russia here. Okay? Soviet Russia. By the way, Soviet Russia is so efficient, one year they produced tens of thousands of tubes of toothpaste and 900 toothbrushes. Central planning. Excellent. Okay. This central planner cares about society's well-being. The planner needs to know every cost for every seller in the market and every buyer's willingness to pay in order to effectively allocate resources within that economy. Likelihood of that happening? Maybe in a commune of 17 people, but not in an actual functional economy. It is the inability of any central planner or even central planning organization to know all of the seller's costs and all of the buyer's willingness to pay that makes planned economies so inefficient. They're incredibly wasteful because the resources always end up in the wrong places. Like thousands of tubes of toothpaste that you have to use with your finger.
Couldn't they trade with somebody?
Nobody traded with the Soviets, really, except Eastern Europe, and they were just as messed up.
They should be nice for people. Maybe they didn't have any.
Tell that to Putin.
I will.
Write him a letter.
Make a shot.
Central planning can be effective in wartime in terms of creating those resources for war. Think back to the United States in World War II. We had all the jeeps, the landing craft, the bombers, the fighters, the bombs, the ammunition, the uniforms, the rifles. We had everything we needed. But you couldn't get tires for your car. You couldn't buy a toaster or a vacuum cleaner. You couldn't get yourself new shoes. You couldn't get sugar. So, again, regardless of what your willingness to pay was. So, for short periods of time in exigent circumstances, yes, central planning can serve a purpose, but there's something being missed. Central planning, frowny face. Yes. Yeah, where resources are misallocated. We're done. Markets, the general rule, markets are a good way to efficiently organize activity. Okay? Markets do a good job of that all by themselves. Remember, we do all of this with a perfectly competitive market. Lots of sellers, lots of buyers, relatively easy entrance and exit from the market. Okay? Anything but a perfectly competitive market, and this stuff falls apart. But we have to start from somewhere to gain understanding. Okay? Coming up, we're going to talk about what happens when, in a market, resources aren't allocated efficiently. We end up with problems, real-world problems, that you actually deal with all of the time. Oh, I keep thinking you've got a question. Are you wanting to launch that? You don't really want to. All right, so week. Time to do some practice.
You're welcome.
I win. That's such a fun game. I always win. Number 2. An early freeze in California sours the lemon crop.
It's not funny when it's an econ.
An early freeze actually does make the lemons more sour. Okay. Explain what happens to consumer surplus in the market for lemons. Explain what happens to consumer surplus in the market for lemonade. Illustrate your answers with diagrams. I like how the book calls them diagrams instead of graphs. Illustrates make you happy?
Like the word make me happy.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So what happens to our curve or our graph here, our diagram? Supply does decrease. It does. Does everybody know why supply shifted to the left? There's just less lemons. Some of them died on the tree. All right. So wow. Okay. Got it? So, the question asks us, what happens to consumer surplus in the market for lemons? Where was consumer surplus initially? Above P1 and to the left of demand. So, consumer surplus was initially sorry, farty finger. There, right? That's consumer surplus. Everybody's good? Okay. Now, after the change, after the freeze, where is consumer surplus? Above P2. Sorry, my fingers are sweaty. I'm nervous. So the green is our new consumer surplus. Yay? Easy? Yay! Yep. Yes.
So does that mean producer surplus?
What happens in lemonade? Same thing.
Did you have to make, oh God. Will you please look at Austin?
Yes?
So does that mean producer surplus?
Does producer surplus increase? No, they both actually decrease. Because producer surplus would have been here, right? And now it's here. That doesn't work. It's
Oh, okay.
now it's there.
They not just made another green.
Do you get? They both shrink when supply moves. Okay. And guys, it's the same graph for lemonade because the same thing happens. You have a smaller number of inputs. I know you have to actually graph it. Yep. All right. Good? Three, suppose the demand for French bread rises. Explain what happens to producer surplus in the market for French bread. Explain what happens to producer surplus in the market for flour. Illustrate your answers with diagrams. All right. So, what happened?
The demand increased.
Yeah, we don't have to know why, it just did. Producer surplus is where? Ethan's just going to come show us. Yeah, somebody else come put their farty finger on the board.
I got it.
going to show us surplus. Sure. Initial producer surplus. Yay. Do you want him to do new producer surplus? It's not. He finally got his PO uniform. Nice. Okay, thank you. We're being recorded. What do you need, guys? Started the recording of the show. I did not touch the old show and put the new one in, no. Thank you. Okay. Did you have it, Zach? Booyah. Hey, guess what? What happens to the market for flour? Yes. Producer surplus did increase because the yellow is bigger than the green.
So we just had to do it for flour, do we have to
You have to do it for both.
for French bread too?
Yeah.
Okay, but it'd be the same.
Yes.
Okay. This is...
It's okay. It's technically not the same because the supply of flour is more elastic, but it's the same.
Not do a problem that makes
Connor.
me think he's not lying to me.
To illustrate this on the graph, like, do we just shade it dark?
Oh, okay. So how would you do it since you don't have the highlighty powers?
If we bring highlighters, can we use them?
Initial producer surplus, and then new producer surplus.
We have to make a key for you.
That's a little.
Okay. There are ways.
Do you want us to make you a key?
Or bring colored pencils, whatever. But you don't get colored pencils on the exam. Yes?
So, because supply or demand goes up for French bread, why does demand go up for flour just because it's made of flour?
Who demands? Yeah, because the suppliers of French bread need to buy more flour to make more French bread. Yep. Yep.
Can we do a problem that does make me think that
Okay, what kind of problem would make you think that I'm not lying to you?
let's do...
I don't know why she thinks I'm lying.
Because it's too easy.
It's too easy.
No,
Number 4. Number 4 is confusing. It's a hot day and Bert is thirsty.
Okay, in the book, why is it Friday?
Here's the value he places on a bottle of water. The value of the first bottle, his willingness to buy, is $7. The value of the second bottle is $5. The value of the third is $3. The value of the fourth is $1. One, 3, 5, 7. Miranda, you look stumped. No, you got it? Just soaking it in? Soaking in my incredibly poor math?
No, I'm not...
Okay, so there's Bert's demand schedule. Okay, we got to do the demand schedule though. Remember what the demand schedule looked like for this?
It's like a, yeah. Because it's like a schedule.
Whoops. 0. Above 7 is 0. So from 5 to 7 is 1. From 3 to 5 is 2. From 1 to 3. Am I right?
Well, what did
Yes, you're right.
7 be 2 because
No.
someone paid $5? Or $5 for the second bottle?
From 0 to 1.
Would you add
He
those
only
prices?
buys
That's the
two.
max price you'll pay.
He only buys 2 if it's less than 5.
Oh, 501.
Point
Would you
oh.
add those prices together because you're buying more?
No.
So should I put that in there just like because? Dude.
And then less than $1, demand is 4. So there's your demand schedule. Hopefully yours will be more legible than mine.
So I have less price. Do you like this? This is a throwback day. Oh no, did you ever do that?
You don't add them together. We've never done that. The value of the fourth bottle is 1. Just that one bottle. He already bought the other 3. We're just considering the fourth bottle. By that time, he's nearly floating. He's looking for an outhouse. That fourth bottle has to come really cheap for him to want that 1/4 bottle. 1 bottle at a time, consider them. Okay? Ethan, did you have a hand up? Guys. Ethan.
Would this be like, would a possible question be like create a demand schedule for this?
Good. That's what we're doing. It's said to do that.
Is there a short answer?
So if there's if a bottle of water is $4, how many bottles does Bert buy? 2. How much consumer surplus does Bert get from his purchases? Show his consumer surplus in your graph. So at $4, where is Bert's consumer surplus?
Maybe 3. Above the area.
It's the area under the curve and above the price.
It's very interesting here. How would you find that without the graph?
You wouldn't find it without graphing. You can only show consumer surplus graphically. Yeah. Well, what?
For that question, when it asks like the price of a bottle of water is $4, why is it 2 bottles of water? Like he only willing to pay $7 for
The first one, and he'll buy the second one for $5.
Okay.
There isn't a bottle of water for sale at $4. He's still only willing to buy 2 because he won't buy the third bottle until it's $3. It told us that. Look in the lower left there. Value of the third bottle is $3. I'm not buying another one until it's $3. At $4, I'm only buying my $7 bottle and my $5 bottle.
Why would you spend $12?
Okay.
You wouldn't. He just spent $8 for 2 bottles of water. This is his surplus. This is the extra bonus he gets because he was willing to pay this much. Guys, this is what we did on Monday. How have you already forgotten it? Okay, the question was, how would you determine the consumer surplus without the graph? Like this. At quantity 1, he paid 4, he was willing to pay 7. That difference is 3 times 1. So consumer surplus of 3. And then add 1 more quantity and 1 more dollar, consumer surplus of 1. So your total consumer surplus is $4. Because math.
For C, so what you just set it at 2 and then just...
So if the price falls to $2,
And the demand change, we have 3 people buying, so
now he's buying how many?
3.
Now he's buying 3 bottles, so his consumer surplus now is... No, this is still his consumer surplus. The other is already consumer surplus. He's still surplusing that much. Just more surplus. Well, we had, up here we had a $4 surplus, right? Well, now we have $5 surplus for 1, right? So we have to do this rectangle is 5. And then this rectangle is 3 tall and 1 wide, so it's 3, and this is 1 tall and 1 wide. So our total consumer surplus is 9.
Oh, okay.
Because geometry.
3 tall, 1 wide.
Good job, Aaron.
Yes? Ethan, are you totally confused? Okay. All right. I'm just checking because this face is not the sign of understanding. So, okay. All right.
I feel like I'm more understanding for people that don't get it in this class. Like in other classes,
Good.
I'd be like, "Are you kidding me?" Oh, is it because you got that like the triangle?
Yes. Except these are rectangles, and we don't have to find the triangle with a half base times height. It's just base times height.
I wish we could use
Because geometry. All right. Yes? Shall we move on to another one?
yes.
Did you do the problems? No, you didn't do the end of chapter problems, so you don't have a specific one to ask, so you're just wanting me to find one that will fit your particular desire. Do one with the triangle.
Can you do number 9?
Yeah, that's true.
Number 9. Technological advance reduces the cost of making computers. Draw a supply and demand diagram to show what happens to price, quantity, consumer surplus, and producer surplus in the market for computers. Can you imagine how many points this is worth? A lot. What happened? Technological advance reduces the cost of making computers. So what happens? How do you know that? A change in technology. So what happens? Supply does what? Okay, so we showed what happened to price. What happens to quantity? There's what happens to quantity. What happens to consumer surplus? Who wants to come show us? Chickens?
Yes.
Chickens? Okay. Consumer surplus is initially... consumer surplus is initially here. And consumer surplus is now okay. Consumer surplus 1 and consumer surplus 2. It is. Okay, good.
That's it?
Got that? Now show what happens to producer surplus. Producer surplus is what?
Wouldn't it be the S curve?
It's the S curve, yes.
So it'd be use pink.
I don't have pink, I have purple. All right, so initial consumer surplus is between what and what? P1 and S1.
It was getting it.
Got that one, Adam.
And new producer surplus is between between P2 and S2.
2 for 2, red.
Mine just looks like I just collided.
Because it's the new surplus.
Yeah, but the new surplus or consumer surplus included.
Consumer surplus increased. Producer surplus decreases. Thanks, Aaron. Naked book. I'm going to take it away.
Dude, don't do it.
Good? Was there more to this one?
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
BCD.
Oh, goody.
That's why I was like, we should do this file.
Okay. So that was computers.
Now we get it.
Typewriters, old school technology. What's the relationship between computers and typewriters? Substitutes. So if the price of computers goes down, what happens to demand for typewriters? Who just said it increases?
There is. Actually, yeah, there is. I would know because
Okay, demand decreases. Is there any change in supply of typewriters?
Title up there?
Is there any change in supply of typewriters? Sadly, based on our parameters here, no. There is apparently at this point in our economic understanding a factory still out there churning out typewriters. They're actually, you can still buy electronic typewriters.
what's the point of electronics? We'll have to use it in court.
So we do. It can be very good for you to, once you've got all of this done, say price decreases and quantity decreases. Give yourself the key up somewhere near your title so you don't have to go back and read the graph over and over and over again. Okay? So then it wants to know consumer surplus and producer surplus, the market for typewriters. Okay? So consumer surplus. Consumer surplus initially, D1, P1. Initial consumer surplus, with blue. Secondary consumer surplus. Okay. Producer surplus. And then secondary producer surplus. So they both got smaller. So consumer surplus got smaller and producer surplus also got smaller. This one went red to blue. This one went purple to yellow. Okay? So total surplus in the market for typewriters did what? It decreased. Total surplus in the market for computers did what? It increased. Because total surplus initially was here. And new surplus, so this is going to be ugly. New surplus is there. Oh, good grief. Because the color's important? Nice.
It's the easy part of this.
You're paying me.
I like that.
free.
Wait, did total surplus for typewriters increase?
Yes. Total surplus. Yeah. Total surplus was.
All of the colored, and then now it's only.
Yeah, total surplus was here. Okay, and new total surplus is here.
So it's basically where you start for both. For the before, and then the after is like where you end. Yes. I'm just clarifying.
Yep. Okay. Now software, right?
Should software producers be happy or sad? Yeah, that's an actual question.
Now that I get supply and demand so much more, yeah, it's crazy how this stuff makes so much more sense.
Even in software.
So computers and software complements. What are you doing on your phone that has any relationship to this?
She's not kidding.
Tomorrow, Shell, when you come in, I want you up front. What happens with our software? It and computers are complements. Do you need to see computers again? Quantity demanded for computers went up, right? So what happens to software? Demand should go up. So what happened? Quantity went up, price went up. So producer surplus to start. Do we need to go through all this? Yes? Okay. Can we just do totals? So total initial total surplus here. And new total surplus is there.
That triangle.
What?
Software code
On consumer surplus. Consumer surplus, the initial consumer surplus is here. And this. Oh, yeah, I did. Oh, I missed the arrow? Oh, okay. Well, no kidding, the calibration's off. So I need to be to the right of it?
Put on the forward one.
Okay. So initial consumer surplus, P1 to demand curve up. There's initial consumer surplus. And the new consumer surplus is P2 to the demand curve. Well, did it decrease? You would have to do math to be sure, because its base is wider. It probably increased. You don't have numbers, so you couldn't math.
So what do you do for that?
Did it ask you that question? No.
Okay.
Miranda was
Like,
Swift was just being obnoxious.
okay, I was like, how do you math that if you don't have numbers to math?
All right. Does this analysis help explain why Bill Gates is one of the richest men in the world? Okay. Should he be happy? He should be happy. Until the next new thing comes along to replace computers, like computers replaced typewriters.
iPads.
I don't know, cybernetic implants?
you're waiting to happen.
Google has a better
Okay. Any questions?
Good. So then you won't forget. What would you do?
Okay. Those of you who feel relatively confident going into tomorrow's quiz.
Say yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, now, I will be available via Twitter tonight.
Not horror.